right, Karen, it's on YouTube. All right, Emily.
All set, Megan? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the City Council meeting, City of Burlingame, May 18th, 2020. The time is now 7:01 p.m. and we're calling the meeting to order. I'd like to take this opportunity to give our city clerk the opportunity to just share how the public can participate in the meeting tonight in case this is the first time you're with us, joining us via Zoom.
Hi everyone. So a few reminders: if you are not speaking or a council member, please keep yourself on mute. And if you're a member of the public, please turn your video off. As far as speaking, if you have a comment that you would like to enter into the record, you can either email publiccomment@burlingame.org or you can Zoom chat me your comment. Thanks, Emily.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. We appreciate that. And if you're joining via phone, you can also obviously hear the whole meeting. If you do want to participate at any given point, you can dial *9 and we'll know that you have a comment. At this point, let's have everybody rise, please, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, which is our tradition at every City Council meeting. All right, please stand, hand over our hearts, and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, could you please do our roll call right now?
Councilmember Coulson?
Here.
Councilmember Brownrigg? Councilmember Brownrigg, are you on mute? Are you no longer here? Did you get kicked out?
We'll lose him. Let's see.
Oh, he's here.
He's on this. I see the screen, but he's not on there.
Where'd he go? We'll check in on him in a second. How about Councilmember Ortiz?
I'm here. Here.
Vice Mayor O'Brien?
Here.
Mayor Beach?
I am here. Okay. I think I see Councilmember Brownrigg returning. So,
Councilmember Brownrigg, are you here?
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry. The peril of working at home.
thank you. And so we're finished with our roll call. Item number 4, report out from closed session. There was no closed session tonight, so we will move right along. Upcoming events, I have a number of announcements I'd like to share with the community. And then I'll see if colleagues have any to add as well. The first one comes from our Parks and Recreation Department. Unfortunately, we just want to make clear to the community that many summer events this summer have been canceled due to COVID-19. That does include music concerts, movies, and the Muddy Mile and the family campout. However, camps right now are being developed and the schedule will be out during the next week. And camp should begin during the week of July 6th. So that schedule will be posted on the Parks and Recreation Department website starting the week of June 1st. We also, just a reminder to everybody, we begin a new set of shelter-in-place orders with some additional restrictions that have changed. So please check back on the city's website or the County of San Mateo's website for updated information. And there's some great press releases that really distill down the highlights. The San Mateo County Transportation Authority is seeking members for the Citizens Advisory Committee. It's an advisory committee to the Transportation Authority that oversees Measure A sales tax dollars and Measure W sales tax dollars for the whole county and builds infrastructure projects. If you're interested in applying, you can check out the website. Deadline is June 5th. There's also a Great Plates program being sponsored by not only the county, but money from federal funding for seniors who may not have support. Eligible seniors who don't have support for people who can help them get groceries if they're shut in their homes and don't have family or friends that can support. There's a great number you can call to inquire if you are eligible for meals delivered from restaurants locally to your home free of charge. And that number is 1-800-675-8437. That's the Great Plates program. You can call if you're a senior. 60 and over, but primarily for 65 and over, depending on eligibility criteria, 1-800-675-8437. There's also a San Mateo County Job Fair happening on June 9th from 10 to 2 p.m. at the Foster City Recreation Center. And I would also like to announce that COVID-19 testing is now widely available. You can always check your own health insurance or healthcare provider, but you can also get tested even if you don't have any symptoms. Everyone is invited to be tested. You can learn more at smcgov.org/COVID-19 testing. And my final announcement is one related to honoring our graduates here in Burlingame and, quite frankly, throughout the San Mateo Union High School District, through the City of Burlingame, the Burlingame School District, and public and private schools. Anybody at any age who has a grad or a student that's moving on and being promoted, you are invited to join neighbors across the Mid-Peninsula on June 12th between 7 and 7:15 p.m. to make some noise for our grads. The schools are all inviting everyone to step outside your front door or your balcony and whoop, holler, applaud, stomp, bang a pot and spoon, whatever it is, cheering on the graduates. And residents can also print a sign if they want to show some spirit for the class of 2020. These will be available on our website. You can hang it in your window or on your door, showing support for the class of 2020 and giving them a milestone to celebrate. So that's all the announcements I have tonight. Colleagues, do you have anything else we should add? I don't see any hands raised unless I missed. So thank you for your patience with those important announcements citywide. And we will at this point move on to our presentation of the evening, which is always one that we enjoy here at City Council. It's an update from our Youth Advisory Committee to the City of Burlingame. And with that, we'll turn it over, as Director Glomstead would like to introduce her team from Parks and Rec, or do we have?
We have Nicole Houghton here to tell you all about.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Houghton, we're glad you're with us.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for having us. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. YAC members, at this time, you can turn on your videos. Thank you for having us tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity to have a little bit of normalcy to be able to present to the council. Our teens, it's my pleasure to be able to work with this group of teens. They are so passionate about what they do, always coming up with new ideas and inspired to just get out there and do something for their community. So at this point, I wanted to introduce our teens that are going to be speaking tonight. So Karina is our first one. So I wanted to pass the mic over to Karina to be able to share a little bit about what we've done this year.
Hi, my name's Karina. I am with the Youth Advisory Committee. I am 17 years old and finishing up my junior year at Burlingame High School. So the last time we talked to you guys was in December, and we wanted to update you on everything we've been able to accomplish this year, despite the recent pandemic that has emerged. But in January, we hosted our Royal Ball. It's one of our most popular events and my personal favorite because it is an event where many generations can come together in one room dressed in their finest prince and princess attire. We served food, we had a crafts table and a photo booth, and it was just really fun to see kids and parents that I recognize from other events that we've put on in Burlingame come together in the same room and dance the night away. Secondly, we focus on a major initiative every year, and this year we chose the environment and going green because that's been a really prominent topic of discussion for a very long time, especially this year. So to start, we had two of our YAC representatives, Caitlin and Cameron, attend a sustainability meeting to grow our knowledge on what it means to be sustainable and help our environment in any way we can. We also participated in a Mills Canyon cleanup with Park Supervisor Rich Holtz to provide us with environmental information. And we actually cleared invasive ivy off of around 80 trees and cleared debris from 500 feet of drainage canals to prevent pollution. And this really helped us get hands-on experience with our environment. This is a hiking trail in our backyard. We were really able to appreciate all the beauty and nature that our city has. And finally, to grow our knowledge on what it means to go green and our initiative even more, we had our conversations with council, and we were lucky enough to talk with Mayor Beach, who is extremely passionate about going green and helping our environment. And it was really wonderful to discuss all the important issues going on in our community with an environmental focus. So we were really able to grow our knowledge, and it really helped our initiative in the long run. And now I'm going to turn it over to Taylor to continue.
Thanks, Karina. Taylor, we look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, I'm Taylor Rowe. I go to Our Lady of Angels School, and I'm in 7th grade. I'm going to be talking about Yak Attack. Yak Attack is a conference put on by teens for teens. It happens every 2 years. My favorite part was participating in a session about behavior, and it taught me that my tone and my mood do matter. We put on a session how to put on an environmental Jeopardy events. We were going to do it at Earth Day, but that got canceled because of COVID. So, yeah.
Hello.
Next up is Dylan.
Hello all. My name is Dylan Aguinaldo, and I'm a freshman at Crystal Springs. So shortly after Yak Attack, the shelter-in-place order was put into order in Burlingame. And even though it was extremely limiting for some of us, the Yak realized that this was a great opportunity to use its voice in a positive way. And one example is that we realized that local small businesses were struggling during the coronavirus and also because of the shelter in place, and we wanted to find a way to support them. So we decided to make short videos advertising local businesses, which were shown on social media. We just concluded our 5th week of making these advertisement videos. We would like to show you last week's video. Megan, would you please play last week's video?
It might take me a second, but I will get us there.
Thank you, Megan.
Sorry, guys. There we go.
Hi, we're the Burlingame Youth Advisory Committee, and we hope you're staying well during this challenging time. Due to this unfamiliar situation, the small businesses of Burlingame have faced a particularly tough time. We need these businesses to make Burlingame Burlingame, and together we can support our local businesses in a safe way. If you're looking to buy quality toys and support a great local business, Five Little Monkeys is an excellent choice. You can buy outdoor toys, children's books, and dolls, all from the comfort of your own home, by ordering at fivelittlemonkeys.com.
Maverick Jack's, a restaurant on 1190 California Drive, offers a variety of delicious burgers, fries, drinks, and so much more. They offer curbside pickup, online ordering, and phone orders where you can pay over the phone. Thanks for watching. You can see our previous videos on Instagram at Burlingame_Parks and Rec and Facebook at Burlingame Parks and Rec. We'll keep you updated about great small businesses and restaurants that are open during this time in our Youth Advisory Committee videos every Wednesday. Let us all do our part to support our community's local businesses.
So that was one of our small business promotional videos. And we also have one final video to share with you, which will show our year at a glance.
All right, 1 second again.
Please stop.
So that video concludes our YAC presentation, and now we would like to address any questions or feedback that the City Council may have.
Well, bravo. Oh my goodness. Karina, Taylor, and Dylan, thank you for the wonderful presentations and the videos. It's been really exciting to see the pictures of your great year, which was, you had to pivot part of the way through, like all of us, right? And I love that you've did a lot of great work in the environmental side of the house, and then you pivoted to try to help small businesses during COVID-19, and it was great to see an example of your video. So bravo. I'm going to open it up to colleagues to see if they have questions or other comments, and I see Councilmember Coulson has her hand up.
Hi there, Yak. So first of all, I think you guys did a great job on the business promotion, and I thought that was really mature of you to think about how this was impacting them. And I also appreciate, I think a couple of you reached out to me and we talked about the value of highlighting more than just one business, but like 3 or 4 a week, and you did that. I've been watching on Instagram, Facebook, following up on everything, and it's looked great. And I've really tried to shop everywhere you guys have suggested. So thanks for being so thoughtful and considerate to the business community.
Excellent. I see Councilmember Brownrigg also has a comment.
Well, I echo Councilwoman Coulson's thanks for thinking about the bigger community, but I want to more personally thank you guys, not just for all the work you do, but in particular, Mills Canyon. That has been a treasure for my family and I since we first moved here, since our kids were tiny. Some of you know my kids, we hauled them through there, and there's a little bit of, feeling like collectively we've let it go a little bit. And now it's so nice to see our parks putting energy in it and all of you guys putting energy into it. It really, as one of you said, is this tremendous asset and treasure in our backyard. And thank you very much for your work at Mills.
Excellent. Other colleagues? I think we all really are sincerely appreciative for your energy and your passion for all things Burlingame, and hopefully as you continue to help our small businesses through this difficult time during shelter in place, if we're lucky by September, we'll be able to do more environmental work again as we shift to sort of celebrate a belated Earth Day late September in conjunction with our Bayfront cleanup and some other events we're hoping to postponed from what would have been April 22nd to the end of September. So I hope we can all look forward to that together and continue reconnecting, and we'll look forward to your participation. So any other final closing comments? I'll just say a huge thank you, and it was a joy to spend some time with conversations with council, with Ms. Houghton and all the students. You do a fantastic job, Ms. Houghton, with them, keeping everybody focused and energy and focused on some really great work in the community. So cheers, great job.
Thank you. Their energy is contagious.
It is, it's wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely, have a great evening, everybody. All right, well, we have now had our presentation. We'll move on to item number 7, which are public comments for items that are not on the agenda. This is when members of the public can speak about any item that we're not speaking about tonight. If you wish to suggest an item for a future council agenda, you can do so now. The Ralph M. Brown Act, which is the state local agency open meeting law, prohibits us from deliberating or acting on any matter that is not on the agenda, but we always welcome public comment at this time. So I'll ask the city clerk, do we have anybody who has written in or would like to speak on a non-agenda item?
Yes, we do. I'll go over the emails first, and then I think we have one in person. So the first email says, Dear City Council, our 700 block of Concord Way dead ends into Washington Park. We see all kinds of traffic from its visitors, especially with the shelter-in-place ordinance. We applaud making the 700 block of Concord safer for children playing on our block and safer for children visiting Washington Park. Designating this block a safe street with 15-mile-per-hour speed limit signage and requesting reductions of unnecessary street parking will make the visibility much better and the street safer for all. Thank you for considering on this safe street designation to the 700 block of Concord Way. And that is from Steve and Elizabeth Johnson. And then we have a public comment.
Madam City Clerk, I'll just, if staff could follow up or forward that email to us afterwards so we can just follow up, that would be terrific. So we can update them on the Safe Streets program.
Okay. Adrian Lee has written in, on behalf of the many residents of Burlingame who are enjoying the closure of Carolyn, I would like to thank the City Council for their support. I've heard many good things from friends and neighbors. She's asked me to hold up a picture, but I'll just forward you all the email afterwards, which shows people using Carolyn Avenue. I have seen scooters, skateboarders, families of bicyclists, and strollers using the street safely. Also, if City Council is considering a temporary closure of Burlingame Ave and or Broadway Ave to enable restaurants to seat patrons on the street or in their parking lots and attract more people to the area, I'm happy to help. It would be great to do this during the summer and fall. Thank you again for approving the Carolyn closure.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. We appreciate your comments. I don't see any other members.
We do have one more. Miss Juliana Garcia, who's in attendance, would like to speak. So you can go ahead. She's still on? Yep. Juliana, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
And
sure.
Thank you for joining us, and I'll give you 3 minutes like everybody else. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you.
Perfect. Hello, my name is Juliana Garcia. My pronouns are she and her. I am a commissioner on the San Mateo County LGBTQ Commission. I wanted to reach out to the Burlingame City Council because we are going through our Pride Visibility campaign, where we are inviting all cities and towns in San Mateo County to support the LGBTQ community by recognizing Pride Month, June 2020. Because of shelter in place and adherence to social distancing, the suggestions I'm providing to you are simple and really intended to bring visibility to Burlingame for your LGBTQ residents. Visibility really allows the LGBTQ residents to know that they are seen and that they are important. These simple acts of visibility will create a deeper sense of connection and inclusion for everyone in the community. So our commission is recommending that Burlingame raise the LGBTQ rainbow flag for the month of June, which really highlights that your city is a leader in the fight for equal rights, and that you will continue to protect and expand the rights of everyone in your area. Another example of showing support is by issuing a Pride Month proclamation declaring June as Pride Month in Burlingame. We've forwarded on to the city clerk a template proclamation, and this is something that other cities in the county, including San Mateo County, are issuing this year as well. Thirdly, San Mateo County has pivoted our annual Pride celebration, which is normally held at Central Park, to be a virtual week-long event of programming from June 8th to 12th. And I've linked also in a follow-up email more information about that, that we'd appreciate if you can share out with your citizens. The last category is virtual mechanisms for showing visibility on the Burlingame City's website, putting a rainbow flag symbol, putting a short history of Pride on the website, and then also listing out to different county LGBTQ organizations to support the different LGBTQ resources that we have for our citizens in San Mateo County.
Thank you. I assume that means you're finished. We appreciate your participation and your comments tonight, Ms. Garcia. Thank you. With that, do we have any additional public comments, Madam City Clerk?
No, but you do have Councilmember Brownrigg with his hand up.
Okay, Councilmember Brownrigg, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So obviously we all know we can't respond to comments raised in public session. However, in light of our discussion last time about Burlingame Avenue, I wonder if the city manager might just relay the thought process. And I'm curious about the timing of talking about that. So not the substance, but just the process that we have underway. If it's appropriate for her to just let, in answer to Ms. Lee's input, tell us what the timing is for talking about that more.
Sure. I hear somebody also yelling in the background of someone's video, so you might want to put yourself on mute if that's you. We met as the Economic Development Subcommittee last Wednesday. We talked about it with members of the Downtown Business Improvement District. They are doing a survey, which is going out this week. They expect to have results hopefully by Friday, and then they'll forward that to staff so we can take a look at it. There was a little bit of disagreement among the participants in the meeting, but it was not a representative sample of all the DBID members. And then we'll bring something back to the city council at one of your meetings in June. I did post something on Nextdoor today telling folks that that was the process, and that the county health order does not allow outdoor dining at this time. So we have not missed the boat on anything. We don't know when outdoor dining will be allowed. So we do have a little bit of time to work through this, but it is currently not allowed under the most recent iteration of the county health order, which went into place today.
Thank you for that update.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. We appreciate you putting that post on Nextdoor as well. Lots of inquiries on that item. Okay, moving on then, unless Madam City Clerk, do we have any other public comment?
No, we do not.
We'll move on then to item number 8, which is the approval of the consent calendar. These are usually approved in a single motion unless they're pulled for separate discussion. So I'd like to ask colleagues, there are 2 items on the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to pull one of these items? Seeing none, I will open it up and ask members of the public if they wish to pull an item off the consent calendar.
I've gotten no such request.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent.
Okay, we
Second.
have a motion by Councilmember Brownrigg to approve items 8A and B, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. We'll take our roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg. I see you mouthing yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. All right, that unanimously passes. Thank you, colleagues. We'll move on to item number 9, which is our public hearings. The first item 9A is a public hearing to renew the levy and collection of assessments for the downtown Burlingame Avenue Streetscape Improvement Project for fiscal year 2021. And I believe this is a staff report from Director Mertusa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. This is a procedural public hearing for the renewal and collection of assessment district for Burlingame Avenue downtown streetscape improvements that was approved by the City Council just about 8 years ago, 2 days less than 8 years ago in 2012. And tonight is essentially as part of the Landscape and Lighting Assessment District Act of 1972. The council is required to approve the assessments every year. There are no changes to the assessments, and it's same as last year and previous years. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Mertusa. Before we open up the public hearing, I'll see if colleagues have any questions on this matter. Seeing none, at this time, I will open up for a public hearing. I'll strike the gavel. Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this matter?
No, we have no request.
All right, I will officially close the public hearing and then turn it back over to colleagues. What we have to consider tonight is to adopt this resolution, which confirms the assessments and orders the levy for downtown Burlingame Avenue Streetscape Improvement Assessment District number 2012-1 for fiscal year 2021. Would anybody like to comment or propose that motion?
Move to approve.
Adopt the resolution, yes. We have a move to approve from our Vice Mayor O'Brien. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Second from Councilmember Coulson. We'll take a roll call vote on this resolution.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg. Are you muted again? Councilmember Brownrigg,
Sorry, yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. Resolution passes unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. We'll move on now to item 9B, which is a public hearing to consider proposed amendments regarding accessory dwelling units. And I'll turn this item over to our Community Development Director, Kevin Gardner. Director Gardner, are you with us?
He's muted.
I'm muted. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Mayor Beach. And I would like to turn this over to Planning Manager Ruben Hurin, who has been the lead on this project.
I'll get your slides up for you, Ruben. 1 second.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. In response to California's statewide and Bay Area's regional housing shortages, the governor signed into law a number of bills to encourage the construction of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs, by reducing barriers commonly found in local zoning ordinances. The state legislation supersedes the city's regulations for ADUs as currently outlined in Municipal Code Chapter 25.59. The proposed changes are to bring the City of Burlingame's regulations into conformity with state law. On March 2nd, the City Council introduced the proposed ordinance. After further discussion, the Council continued action on the item, requesting that staff provide additional information and clarifications. The City Council also asked staff to consider additional changes to the proposed ordinance with respect to roof configurations and heights, plate heights, and locations of windows and skylights. Staff thought these suggested changes were helpful in providing further guidance for construction of ADUs, so we thank you for your input. Next slide. As a quick overview, ADUs may be detached or attached single-family dwellings. Existing garages or accessory structures and spaces within single-family dwellings may be converted to an ADU. And although not shown on this slide, ADUs are also permitted within existing multifamily structures. In addition, up to 2 new detached ADUs may be added on a lot containing a multifamily structure if they comply with the regulations. I would point out that junior accessory dwelling units are only permitted within the walls of a single family dwelling. Next slide. In addition to allowing double pitched roofs, members of the City Council expressed a desire to also allow shed roof and flat roof designs on detached ADUs, noting that they can be more sensitive to neighbors in some situations and that flat roofs offer additional benefits, such as allowing for green roofs or living roofs and solar panels where they can provide ecological and economic benefits. Language was revised to clarify that green roofs are not considered a balcony, a second-story deck, or a rooftop terrace, and therefore would be permitted by right. Next slide. Given that there's an eclectic mix of architecture throughout Burlingame, shed and flat roofs would allow ADUs to be compatible with mid-century, modern, contemporary, and Spanish-style homes. In addition, many homeowners prefer the simplicity of an ADU with a flat or shed roof, even though it may differ from the design of their existing house. The revisions to the proposed ordinance would permit detached ADUs to have a double pitched roof as shown in the upper left-hand corner, a hip roof right below that, a shed roof or a single slope in the upper right-hand corner, or flat roofs. Some ADU designs could have a combination of these roof forms, such as a double pitched and a hip roof. Next slide, please. In most, with regards to plate heights, in most cases, maximum plate height would not be allowed to exceed 9 feet above grade. The exception would be ADUs with a shed roof, which would specify that the plate height on the lower side of the structure cannot exceed 9 feet above grade, while the opposite side of the structure can be taller with the 16-foot maximum, as specified by state law. In addition, to avoid a 16-foot tall wall along the side or rear property line, the maximum plate height allowed on walls parallel with side and rear property lines is 9 feet. And this is more clearly depicted on the next slide, if we can go to the next slide. So in order to mitigate impacts on neighboring properties, the taller side of the structure would not be allowed to run parallel with the side or rear property lines, which is shown here along the right side of the structure. So what we would want to see is the lower side being the 9-foot plate running along the side or rear property line, not the taller side. Next slide.
Wait, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So, can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, so the question is, just to be clear, so that picture that we were looking at would not be allowed because the taller side would be on the property line, correct?
Correct. Well, the taller side would not be allowed to run adjacent to or parallel with the side or rear property line. It would have to be the lower side. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It really is to reduce the impact of a really tall wall immediately adjacent to a property line. With regards to, if we can go to the next slide, Megan. With regards to windows and skylights, the City Council also noted a concern with skylights on sloping roofs facing a neighbor's property and also windows abutting side and rear property lines. Windows and skylights are standard features typically found in living areas, are necessary to comply with egress requirements such as windows, and provide natural light and ventilation. Windows and skylights would still be required to comply with building and fire codes, which means that in most cases, no openings would be allowed within 4 to 5 feet of property line. In the spirit of addressing the council's concerns and allowing the ability to provide flexibility in the design of living spaces, staff included the following changes in the proposed ordinance. One would be to allow skylights on sloping roofs that face interior yards and flat roofs by right. Require approval of a conditional use permit for skylights on sloped roofs facing side yards that are located within 10 feet of property line, and skylights on sloping roofs facing rear property lines. We would allow windows located 4 feet or greater from property line by right, but we would require approval of a conditional use permit for windows located within 4 feet of property line on walls that are parallel with the side and rear property lines. Staff is suggesting 4 feet because it reflects a typical setback requirement. Lastly, we wanted to note that staff did receive a letter this afternoon from Matthew Gelfand with Californians for Home Ownership, expressing concerns with certain sections of the draft ordinance. Staff has not had the opportunity to review the letter in detail, but we will do so before the item comes back before adoption at the next meeting. This concludes the summary of the staff report. I'd be happy to take any questions you have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. We really appreciate your hard work on this. Again, it's a great summary. I think I really appreciated the staff report was very clear, and the meeting minutes that were attached from our prior March discussion really addressed, I think, many of the questions, and great visuals tonight in your presentation. So thank you for that. Colleagues, I see that Councilmember Ortiz has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going back to the same picture, the shed roof that we were looking at. It would have to be, the slope would be facing the neighbors if we have the lower side towards the property line. And so that means that if you have a slope going towards the neighbor side, you cannot have a skylight on that roof.
That's correct. One would have to apply for a conditional use permit in that case. And that applies to both roof slopes that face the side property line or the rear property line.
Yeah, so that if you have the shed roof and the requirement of the lower side being towards the property line, basically makes it that every single shed roof would require a conditional use permit for the skylight.
That's correct. And that was really to address the concern of direct impacts right on property line facing someone's rear yard.
Okay, thank you.
It's not that it's not impossible, but we would require a conditional use permit. That neighbor would be notified of the proposal.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, I see Vice Mayor O'Brien has a question. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple. So one is in regard to the ADU, is it the first 800 or 850 square feet that's exempt from FAR and lot coverage?
In the ordinance, we are proposing 850 square feet. And
okay, if it exceeds 850 square feet, is it just that part that's added to the FAR, or does it include the whole thing?
It would include the whole thing if it exceeds 850 square feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. So it's not just the excess beyond 850.
That's correct.
Okay. My second question is it possible to incorporate that if you have a window facing someone's rear yard that it's obscure?
We've found that that's a little bit more difficult to do, even with design review projects where we've had that condition placed on projects. It's a little bit more difficult to follow up on that. Sometimes they put up film that can be easily removed. Windows can be replaced in the future. We're fairly confident that in most cases, neighbors will have fences that are 6 to 7 feet tall and either some vegetation that would help obscure that window. So in the past, we have tended not to try to get into the frosting of the windows. It's just a challenge to enforce that.
Okay, and that leads to my next question. The purpose of doing these ADUs is to offer affordable housing. So how do we know whether or not these ADUs are used appropriately?
So that,
like, I don't want people to develop ADUs and then they end up using it for their own offices or play structures for the kids, or, the teenage hangout for the family.
Sure. No, that's perfectly reasonable. We've thought about that too. State law really doesn't specify that. They don't provide any safeguards for that. What we envision for Burlingame residents is that space, over 10, 15, 20 years may become flexible, where at first they may rent it out to somebody who really needs it, a teacher, a police officer. And then, that could be used for perhaps a son or daughter coming home from college for a while. And then in the future, perhaps for older parents that may want to use that unit. So we see it as a flex space. We will be encouraging owners to use it for affordable housing or for that type, but it's really hard to monitor or follow up on that.
Okay. Is there any way we could take it that step further and that you have to register that ADU so it can be looked upon if people complain about the ADU? I just don't want people to find the loophole of utilizing it as extra FAR for their house. And then also you can convert a garage into an ADU. And I think that's fine if you're actually using it as an ADU, or if like you said, kids come home from college and they're living back there, or you have a caretaker there to help with older seniors that may be in the primary residence. But if you're putting aside parking for primary residence and you're not using that ADU correctly, I do not think that is fair.
Sure. No, yeah, I agree with you on that too. I think what we can do is definitely at the final inspection, we make sure that there's a kitchen facility, that it's properly built as an ADU. I don't know if the city attorney may want to add to that in terms of how far we can go and as far as reviewing it as an ADU or making sure it's in compliance as an ADU?
That's something that we can look into in a little more depth and include in our staff report when it comes back, either for reintroduction or for adoption. Vice Mayor, our planning manager is correct. We're somewhat tied by the state legislation on that, but we can take a deeper dive into that and see what we can find that other cities may have tried to employ.
Okay, I would appreciate that, because the state is saying, wants this because of affordability, which is understandable. But if people aren't using it, then I think that's mismanaging the goal of why we're doing this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I concur and appreciate staff's willingness to look into that. I too, that gave me pause as well, and I think it would be valuable to understand at least what we can do to help make sure that all the streamlining of additional space is being used for the intended purpose for housing, if that's what it's being approved for. Colleagues, do we have other questions? Seeing none, let me see where we are at here. This is an item where we now officially have to request the city clerk to read the title of the proposed ordinance.
Sure. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Burlingame amending Title 25, the zoning code of the Burlingame Municipal Code, chapters 25.59, 25.60, 25.26, and 25.70 to update existing accessory dwelling unit regulations to be consistent with recently adopted amendments to California Government Code sections 65852.2 and 65852.22 related to accessory dwelling units.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. I'd like to entertain a motion from colleagues to waive further reading and introduce the proposed ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Brownrigg, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. At this point, do we need a roll call vote for that, Madam City Clerk?
Yes. Councilmember Coulson?
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg?
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien?
Yes.
Mayor Beach?
Yes. All right, thank you for that, colleagues. At this point, the motion passes, so I will open up a public hearing at this point on the proposed ordinance. And I will ask the city clerk if we have any members of the public who have written in or chatted or dialed *9 on their phone that would like to comment on this public hearing.
Yes. Well, everyone received the email from Matthew from the Californians for home ownership, so I won't reread that email. And Ruben addressed his concerns. The other email we got is from Jennifer Pfaff, and she says, "Good evening, Mayor Beach, council members, and staff. Thank you for your work on the various details of concern that were brought up at the previous council meeting. One item that still seems potentially problematic is how the city can realistically navigate item 3, permeable surface and trees. Staff notes that chapter 11.06, the urban reforestation and tree protection standard, can be applied as part of an ADU project. That is great news. However, if there is little or no below grade space, then this may turn out to be unachievable, potentially undermining our coveted urban forest. Is there a way to clearly convey in the ADU materials that the chapter 11.06 urban reforestation and tree protection standard applies so that applicants are aware and not surprised? Thank you for your consideration."
Thank you for that public comment, Ms. Pfaff. Do we have any other public comments?
I don't see anyone's hand up, nor have I received a chat.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised from the public at this point, so I'll close the public hearing. And I would like to give staff an opportunity to respond to Ms. Pfaff's question. So who would like to take that?
Sure, yeah. we will, and we currently do have a set of ADU guidelines that we put out for the public, and we can certainly include a requirement that it would need to comply with tree forestation ordinance, so that applicants are aware of that. And as the ADU goes through the building permitting process, the Parks Division, City Arborist will also be reviewing the plans, and we'll be looking to ensure compliance with that section of the code.
And if I could just add, Madam Mayor, I would actually recommend against specifically calling out the tree ordinance in this ordinance, just because all of our ordinances apply. And if we start selecting one, it starts creating the impression that maybe others don't also apply. So basically any applicable law under state or our own zoning code or our own municipal code will apply, and the tree ordinance is one of those provisions. But I don't think we want to start picking out certain ones because it can lead to the impression that others might not.
Okay, thank you for that input and clarification, Madam City Attorney. I see that Councilmember Brownrigg has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm going to just apologize ahead of time. I now have 3 children under the roof, all of whom have loud opinions. So if you hear background noise, it's probably coming from me, Madam City Manager. First of all, I want to thank staff. I thought you guys did a great job of incorporating the concerns that we raised last time about effects on neighbors and really thinking about the design of secondary units. I don't have anything more to suggest by way of the ordinance. I think it's solid as written. But I have 2 broader comments, and I'm just going to take a minute here. One, I'm going to address Ms. Pfaff's comment. I think her point before is really well made, and that is we don't regulate subterranean excavation. And so I think one of the elements we could do, Mr. Huron, is look at in the future banning excavation within the side setback and maybe the rear setback, but certainly the side setback, so that you can have trees along that 4-foot or 5-foot setback. Because you can't, she's quite right. If you excavate to the property line, there's no way you'll get a tree to grow. So I just want to sort of put a pin in that one. That was one of her concrete ideas about how we can create planting space. But my bigger point is this. The state is determined to take away any city's ability to create an urban forest and open space on lots. I mean, I really think that's what it comes down to. They assign very low value to yards and space. And we have been playing sort of catch up on this and making adjustments to the rules that Sacramento has handed down. I think it might behoove this city to rethink how we want to think about our single family home neighborhoods and actually positively get in front of sort of duplexes and triplexes on single family home neighborhoods. Because if we set design guidelines that make a really elegant 2 or 3 unit building feel like a single family home, even if it's a little taller perhaps, I think we'll do 2 things in the long run. One, I think we'll do a better job preserving the look and feel of Burlingame single family home neighborhoods. And we'll also provide, I think, more space for trees and gardens and birds and bees and open space, rather than going down the road of allowing one more shed unit after another on 60 by 120 foot lots, which is what most of us have who are homeowners or home renters. So I just want to suggest that I think our city would be well served by thinking ahead about how to expand housing on single family home neighborhoods, not constantly playing catch up to Sacramento's, don't worry about lot coverage, just keep putting more and more sheds and small units on the property. And I realize that's not what we're here talking about exactly, but I think it is part of future-proofing Burlingame's design ethos. So I just wanted to say that. And sorry, and I'll finish with this. I mean, I have seen properties up and down the peninsula now in other communities where they have had second and third houses on a single family home lot. And absolutely what happens is there is more and more cement, more and more patio space, and fewer trees. So I just think it's something for us to think about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Appreciate your comments, and I will, we can't be deliberating that tonight, so I'd encourage colleagues not to respond to that. If that's something we want to consider for a future agenda item, we can, discuss that at a later point in the meeting. But do we have other questions or comments on the ordinance as proposed? Councilmember Ortiz, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do want to echo what Councilmember Brownrigg said. Thank you to staff for incorporating all the issues that we brought up last time. I think that we've come up with something very workable, and it's not exactly perfect. I still have issues with the Skylights, but I think it's going to work really well, and I appreciate all their work. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. With that, unless I'm just making sure I don't see any other hands up. I do see a physical wave. Yes, Councilmember Colson. Sorry, you were not in my Brady Bunch window.
No, sorry about that. What I wanted to say is I really appreciate the applicant who I'm just working through we're trying to do virtual agendas and regular meetings, and what I wanted to do was really say how much I appreciated the Mehta family, Neil Mehta and his wife, for coming in and explaining to us, having an Eichler up in the top, how the original code didn't really fit with their style of housing, and just the gracious and generous way that they contributed to the conversation through both their email and through attending the meeting, to help us understand, various perspectives. And they just did a really nice job on it, and their email was incredibly helpful to me. And I just want to make sure we acknowledge the work that they put into helping us craft this.
Thank you, Councilmember Colson. So with that, I think we've had a pretty robust discussion on it, and I am looking here, which of course I dropped. There it is. Thank you. At this point, we have to consider whether or not any changes are requested and whether or not to direct staff to bring it back for adoption and ask the city clerk to publish a summary of the ordinance. Colleagues, do we have consensus that we should move forward at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need Madam City Clerk, do we need a vote on that, or are we okay just to go with the head nods? Or maybe that's a city attorney question.
We usually don't do a vote. You can do a vote if you would like on this, but usually just ask me to bring it back.
Okay, so I think there was one clarification that the Vice Mayor, just for further, asked staff to look into, but at the ordinance as written, I think we are moving forward. And Madam City Attorney, are you okay without a roll call vote on that?
Yes, that's fine. And in the interim, we'll take a look into some of those other issues and include those in the staff report.
Okay, thank you so much. So with that, we will conclude item 9B and move on now to item 9C, which is consideration of an urgency ordinance suspending current penalties and assessments for the Tourism Business Improvement District, and adoption of a resolution which would set a public hearing to modify the 2020 district assessments, all in response, of course, to COVID-19 and the public health emergency that we're dealing with. So there's a few staff members that are headlining this staff report. I think I'll turn it over to our city manager, Lisa Goldman, at this point to make initial comments and let us know who will be presenting.
Great, I can lead us off here. And I also wanted to acknowledge that we have John Hutar on. He is the president and CEO of the San Mateo Silicon Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I won't try to tell you what that acronym is because there's too many letters in it. But John is a really good partner to the city. And we have been talking to Mr. Hutar about the challenges that the hotels are facing. in this very difficult time for everyone, and particularly for the tourism folks. And so they have asked for a change to the way the assessments are collected. We serve as the agent to do the Tourism Business Improvement District. We bring that to you every November and December. We set a public hearing, we hold a public hearing, and then the assessments are levied for the calendar year. And they have written to us asking that we change that process. The first quarter, they're keeping the same with the assessments, but the second quarter, calendar year quarter, they want to suspend assessments for all hotel partners. That poses some logistical issues for us because those assessments have already either been paid or in the process of, but we'll figure that out at the finance department. And then for quarter 3 and quarter 4, they want to reduce the assessment by 50% each quarter to give their hotel partners a little bit of a break. Because this was done by ordinance way back when, we have to do an emergency ordinance now, an urgency ordinance, excuse me. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to the city attorney so she can explain the procedure.
Hi, thank you, Lisa. Yes, so we have 2 items before you tonight, and they're linked, obviously. One is the urgency ordinance itself, and the council's familiar that those need to be adopted by a supermajority. So that would require an affirmative vote of 4 of you. And we'll want to do our ordinance procedures for that. The thing about urgency ordinances is that they don't follow the usual pattern of being introduced at one meeting and adopted at a subsequent one and then going into effect 30 days after that. They're in response to an urgent problem. Here, the urgent problem is obviously the COVID-19 public health emergency and the drastic impacts that it's had on the membership of the group. The reason we have to do an ordinance for a portion of it is that the ordinance that created the district in the first place puts an affirmative burden on Burlingame staff to assess certain kinds of penalties for late or non-payment. And at the request of the board, we really don't want to be doing that right now for fairly obvious reasons. So in order to relieve us of that obligation, we have this urgency ordinance so that staff at Burlingame does not have to pursue collections against the member entities. And then the other part that you have is the resolution of intent that you're used to seeing year over year. It's just happening off cycle here. Last year we had the full report and you adopted first the resolution of intent and then the report and the assessment schedule. This resolution of intent is saying that you intend to reduce the Q3 and 4 charges per the board's request. And then the hearing for that resolution of intent will happen in June. And the reason why there's a little bit of a lag there is that there are a number of statutorily required noticing procedures that have to take place between tonight's meeting and the June hearing. So we're going to have to just check all those boxes before we can have a hearing on that. So that is, it's a little bit of a complicated item, but that is the plan. And so what we would end up with at the end of this is a public hearing on the ordinance, introduction and a public hearing on the ordinance, adoption of the ordinance, if that's the direction that you want to go, and then also adoption of the resolution of intent so that you can have a public hearing in June on the reduced charges for Q3 and Q4.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Attorney and Madam City Manager, for talking us through that. It's a little bit more complicated than it normally is, but you made it very clear and we appreciate that. And we also appreciate Mr. Hutar representing the Silicon Valley Convention and Visitors Bureau, who's with us tonight, and our hearts certainly go out to all the hoteliers and all the folks that are just suffering so much as a result of COVID-19, particularly in the travel industry, since we're discussing that tonight. At this point, we've received a staff report and we'll see if colleagues have any clarifying questions before we begin our procedures tonight to consider this issue. Seeing no hands raised at this time, I will ask the city clerk to read the title of the proposed ordinance.
An interim urgency ordinance of the City of Burlingame suspending application of sections 11 and 12 of City of Burlingame Ordinance number 1648, relating to deficiencies and penalties for underpayment of assessments for the San Mateo County Tourism Business Improvement District.
Thank you. Colleagues, at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
Move to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
Thank you. Motion made by Councilmember Ortiz, and did I hear a second from the Vice Mayor O'Brien? Okay, thank you. We will do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg. Are you on mute again?
Yes.
I was in all kinds of trouble tonight, Councilmember Brown.
She keeps frustrating me. She keeps muting me. No,
I
that's
didn't mute you this time. That's you. Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes, Megan, be nice.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. Okay, that motion carries unanimously. At this point, I will open a public hearing with my imaginary gavel. And I will ask the city clerk if we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
We have received no emails, nor is there a chat or a hand raised.
Okay.
If I might add, Mr. Hutar might want to say something on it. I don't know.
I was just looking to see if he has his hand raised. Mr. Hutar, if you would like to say anything, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for considering our matter. And, you know, the hotels are really hurting. We have almost 25% of the room inventory closed due to COVID-19. So this step just made sense to get ahead of it, to do what we can to assist the members. It will reduce our budget by about 50%. We've gone through a restructuring of our team, of shedding all unnecessary expenses, but we want to be there for them when tourism rebounds. We're working hard to the county on sanitation efforts, on how we would properly message when it is appropriate to market our destination again. And we feel that that will come later in the year. And certainly for the second quarter, there is no tourism to speak of right now. Hotels are running in single-digit occupancy. We are optimistic that as the shelter orders are lifted, that we will have a creep back to normalcy, and hence the full suspension and then the 50% waiving in fees, so that we to market when travelers return. Unfortunately, it's quite a simple process, right, to waive and offer a 50% reduction. The rules that we're bound by are quite complex, and we're very appreciative of the city attorney, city manager, and staff that we've worked with to give us counsel and guide us through this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hutar. We appreciate your comments. And I'll just color commentary before we see if there's any other members of the public who wish to speak. I think we're very lucky to have your leadership and the great team that you've built and your strong board to kind of navigate through these challenges ahead. We want to be here to support you any way we can. So Madam City Clerk, do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
I haven't received an email or chat or hand up.
Okay, then at this point, I will close the public hearing and open up the discussion of this urgency ordinance, part 1. And then the other component is the resolution of intent for future rate modifications and determine whether or not we should adopt them. Colleagues, do we have any comments or questions or?
Motion to approve.
Okay. I see no other.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to create clarity for the record, can we do this in 2 motions since one of them has to be a supermajority?
Sure. So if there's no further discussion and I don't see any other colleagues raising hands, we'll take the first one first. So we will I see Councilmember Brownrigg suggested a motion to approve the urgency ordinance, and there was a second by Councilmember Ortiz. We'll do a roll call vote on this, and we'll need 4 affirmative votes for it to pass.
Councilmember Coulson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien.
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes, well, it got 5, so unanimously passed. Thank you. At this point, I need to entertain a motion, if somebody would like to make it, to approve the resolution of intent for future rate modification to be set in June, I believe on June 15th.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilmember Ortiz. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Mayor O'Brien, and we will do our roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg.
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien.
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes, motion passes unanimously. So to be continued towards the middle of June, where we will have a hearing on the proposed assessments. Thank you so much. And Mr. Hudar, thank you so much for joining us tonight and adding that insight and commentary.
Well, thank you very much.
Leadership. All right. Moving on to now item 10A, which is probably an item that many members of the public have been waiting for. So we're glad you stuck with us. This is where we are considering a resolution to approve the draft Lion Hogue and adjacent neighborhoods traffic calming studies and recommendations report prepared by TJKM Transportation Engineers and our city staff and members of the public who have been participating in this conversation for a number of months, actually more than months. This is now, I think, year number 2 that we're sort of bringing it to fruition. So I'd like to take this opportunity to turn it over to our Public Works Director, Director Martuza, to introduce this and then introduce his staff who'd like to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As you just alluded, this is a report that to present you with the findings and conclusion of traffic calming studies that was initiated as a result of the town hall meeting that was conducted by City Council in May of 2018, which was attended by almost 100 of or so residents of the Lion Hogue and adjacent neighborhood. But before I introduce staff who will be making the presentation and the consultant team, I would like to thank over hundreds of residents who participated in the public outreach process and provided input over the last year and a half. And our Traffic Safety and Parking Commission, who also heard the matter and provided significant input in the process. And finally, the Citizens Advisory Panel that included John Martos, Commissioner John Martos, Commissioner Jeff Launder, and Commissioner Chris Bush, and including residents Jennifer Pfaff, Lynn Feeney, and Laura Hesselgren, who spent countless hours to guide the process, provide early input, and also facilitate meetings during the outreach process. With that, I have Michael Tsai, who will provide a brief presentation. There's a lot of details in the report itself, but we have condensed that into a PowerPoint. Michael Tsai will go through that. And also we have Ruta Jariwala, who is with TJKM project manager. She will also be available to answer any questions. Mike.
Oh, I can unmute myself. Thank you, Mr. Martuza. Good evening, and thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. I am here to present the Lion Hogue Traffic Calming Project. If we could just start the presentation. Great, so why don't we go on to the second slide, please. So this is the project area map. It was a big undertaking. This neighborhood consisted of over 14 streets and over 50 intersections between California Drive and Rollins Road. Next slide, please. What are our project goals? Well, sometimes the numbers only tell part of the story, and we really wanted to hear from the residents. And that was our main goal, to engage with the residents. Part of that effort was to form the Citizen Advisory Panel that Director Matuza was explaining. And then from that, from everything that we hear, we want to go ahead and identify what things are traffic related and what things we can go and take a closer look at. And then ultimately to develop strategies and some solutions to try and address those concerns. Next slide, please. So we've seen this before. This is the project overview. And as you can see, we first started in May of 2018. So that would make it almost exactly 2 years since we started. And a lot of that has been public outreach. You can see we have a lot of CAP meetings. We have a lot of community workshops, and all of those were led by the lead consultant, TJKM. Again, they're also available here for any questions you might have in the end. And yeah, we have a draft report today that is up for discussion and consideration. Next slide, please. So community outreach. So 2 years ago, when we first started all the outreach, we tried a lot of different ways to hear from the neighborhood. We had a project website, linehotrafficcalming.com. We had an online survey. We sent out a lot of postcards. And we also, again, had the advisory panel. Next slide, please. Here's a few pictures, one from each of our community workshops. Most of our workshops, while there were some of the same individuals, I was surprised to find that we had a lot of new people at each one of these workshops, and we heard a lot of different things, which is why I think it's important that we come up with an iterative approach and we kind of reassess as we go. Next slide, please. So out of everything that we heard, the most common concerns that we heard were speeding and cut through traffic, followed then by parking and sight distance. So we are definitely focusing on the speeding and cut through traffic. So next slide, please. On to some recommended solutions. Next slide. So traffic calming is not revolutionary. We've seen all of the tools available to us, and just to go over a few of them, there are edge line markings, red curbs, median islands, high visibility crosswalks, some speed feedback signs, road humps, flashing beacons, bulb outs, and traffic circles. Next slide.
Michael, I believe that Councilmember Brownrigg has a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Brownrigg.
With the mayor's permission, is that all right, Madam Mayor?
Of course, go right ahead. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
No, that's quite all right. So we can also wait till the end, but this to me is a sort of striking series of proposed solutions. They're all terrific, but what is missing from this, it seems to me, is the notion of, on wider streets, creating protected bike lanes, which obviously has the same outcome as bulb outs and other things that make a road feel narrower and then slow cars down. And I guess I'm just curious here on this particular slide why that isn't one of the options.
So the question is, how come a class 4 separated bike lane isn't proposed as a traffic calming technique?
Yes, I guess that is thank you, Michael. That's much more succinct.
So it's interesting, as everyone is aware, we also have a concurrent effort with the Ped Bike Master Plan. And that really, to sum it all up, took into account the origins and destinations, figured out which routes should be bike routes and which ones shouldn't. In this neighborhood, I believe Howard was one of the main bike routes, which is existing and proposed to be beefed up a little bit. And there's also a neighborhood route. But getting back to why a class 4 isn't shown. So a class 4 actually requires more space than you would think. Class 4 would include not only a parking protected.
Mr. Sai, could you just clarify for everybody, because some of these terms, what class 4 means for purposes of the public and for make sure everybody's on the same page of music?
Sure. Okay. So the state has guidelines on classifying all the different types of bike facilities. So starting with class 1, they've determined a class 1 facility to be one that's separated, went only for bikes and peds. A class 2 facility would be that of a typical bike lane that you would see with 2 lines. What that really does is it separates, where the car goes and where the bike goes. That's a class 2. A class 3 would be a shared facility. Most people have seen sharrows painted on the travel lane, and that basically implies that or entails that cars and bikes share that same lane. That's a class 3. And finally, class 4, it's similar to a class 2, where you have a striped bike lane, but now you have a feature in between the bike lane and the travel lane, creating a type of separation. And now there are many different types of separation. It can be parked vehicles. It can be raised barriers. They can be delineators and things like that. So back to why we don't see that here, there really only was 1, maybe 2 streets that could have seen some kind of improvement to the bike facility. But class 4s take more space than you would think. And that wasn't available here. That's why it's not shown.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Silo, can you address though, class 4 is one thing, class 4 is buffered, but when we're talking about class 2, I mean, many people use well, not the center line, but the side, I'm blanking on the curb line as a place for essentially a makeshift class 2, if you will. Even Howard doesn't have buffered. It's just basically a very small bike lane, adjacent to parking. Could you address, were some of those kinds of facility treatments considered as well?
Yes, I can. And they were for Howard, speaking about Howard specifically, there is just enough room actually to widen the existing bike lane on Howard. The bike lane on Howard today is about between 4 and 4.5 feet. And we are able to widen that to 5 to 5.5. And the preferred width for this type of facility is 5. So right now we're at somewhere where it's undesirable and we have just enough space to make it to meet those minimum widths.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and continue and tell us about the other proposals. Thanks.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is a recommended solutions map. So again, this presentation does accompany a staff report and a full project report. And we've kind of just highlighted 6 locations that we think are good examples of what's being done throughout the neighborhood. So next slide, please. The first location right there in the middle of the neighborhood will be high visibility crosswalks at Howard and Dwight. Next slide. So this is a little before and after. The top right image is what exists today. That's an all-way stop, a multi-way stop, stop in all 4 directions. One of the things we're trying to do with this project is give drivers more natural cues and kind of influence a slower driving behavior, right? The #1 criteria that people were concerned about was speeding. So one of the things we heard was, hey, we couldn't tell that was a stop sign, they just blew right through it. And one of the things that we're doing systemically is changing the look of the multi-way stops, making them stand out more and more apparent. And to do that, it's creating this 4-way stop with enhanced crosswalks. So this is an example of something that's going throughout the entire neighborhood at existing all-way stops. Next slide, please. The second location will be high visibility crosswalks and bulb outs at Howard and Anita Road. Next slide. So bulb outs can be expensive and they can also be very affordable. What you see here are 3 different versions. Starting from the very left, they're striped bulb outs with delineators. So this is a more interim approach to kind of see how drivers respond and how neighbors and residents feel about what that might be like, a striped bulb out. The middle picture is more of a detached bulb out. The green portions of that are actually concrete. And this is also kind of temporary because you don't have to worry about drainage and things like that because all the existing civil improvements remain and you just kind of create separated space with concrete detached bulb outs. And then finally, the most expensive option is the picture on your right, your full bulb outs. Those will be much more design heavy because you do have to worry about now changing the drainage of the street and also making sure that your sidewalks are level and they match. Next slide, please. The third location we've seen before in a previous presentation, it's a traffic idea, it's an idea for a traffic circle at Dwight Road and Vernon. Next slide, please. And this is what it looks like. So there's 4 pictures here. If we could just look at the picture on the right, that's what it is today. It is a kind of a 3-legged intersection with a triangular island in the middle. But this intersection is so large that it still allows 2-directional movement in all 3 directions. So that has been reported to have some confusion and some speeding issues because you're able to carry that speed right through that intersection. What's being proposed is in the bottom left, a traffic circle that is much larger, accompanied by some striping that makes it essentially one way. Now it's going to operate more like a traffic circle, kind of like the roundabout you see at California Drive. You do have to go around. You can't just sweep all the way through and carry all your speed. There's 2 pictures on the top left that kind of show not exactly what you might see, but something similar of what a temporary trial traffic circle would look like. And then what a more permanent one would look like. That example is a little small, but essentially that's what it would look like. Next slide, please. The 4th location we want to look at is the traffic circle at Bayswater and Bancroft. Next slide. Again, the top right is the existing and the bottom left is the proposal. So these streets, they're not incredibly wide. We can't fit a roundabout. We may not be able to fit the large traffic circle like we had, over at Vernon, but we may still be able to find space for smaller traffic circles that still do have an impact on perceived speeds and how fast you can drive and things like that. Next slide. The 5th location is interesting. We kind of added that in the end based on what we heard from all the residents. Next slide. This is Burlingame and East Lane. So we just acclimate ourselves to the image on the right. On the corner of the tennis court, it's a bit of a challenge to cross at this area. It's quite wide. It's a little unclear where the travel lane might exactly be, and it's challenging. And so one idea is what we've proposed on the bottom left, really to squeeze down this intersection, take away any sweeping turn opportunities, shorten the crossing distances, and overall make things work a lot better. Next slide, please. The last location we want to take a look at is at the corner of Howard and Victoria. Next slide. This corner is directly adjacent to the park. In the top right image, you can see, I believe it's the basketball court. And this is something we really wanted to encourage access to, and we did hear a lot of complaints about the crossing here, and also, again, a big issue was speeding along Howard. And this is one of those areas where the speed was a little higher based on the data that we collected. So we are proposing a new multi-way stop here based on everything that we heard and the stop warrants. Next slide, please. So some solutions we didn't cover. Road humps. We are now open into some trial road humps. The left image is more of a temporary approach that is bolted to the roadway. And if those go well, at later phases, they're proposed to then be made into permanent, such as the image on your right. Next slide, please. This is another concept of what Bayswater might look like. So Bayswater is actually quite similar to Howard. It's maybe a little wider than Howard, but it's very similar. But Howard has the bike lane, whereas Bayswater doesn't. And that's okay because they are parallel. They kind of take you to the same places. And this is just an example of what it might look like with some striping treatments, such as an edge line or a center painted median, or we could reserve it for a future bike facility opportunity. So, next slide. So implementation, we have a lot of different things going in, and we've divided that into 3 phases. And this kind of shows the iterative approach that we've constantly aimed for. Phase 1, they are typically more low-cost solutions. And they give us an opportunity to try out a lot of the more expensive things, allow us to collect some feedback from residents, allow us to see driver behavior changes before we make them permanent. Phase 2, it's where we are able to take some of those things that were successful and start to make them more permanent. And phase 3, that's just reserved for the highest, most expensive options, which are the permanent bulb outs and things like that that require roadway grading and things like that. Next slide. So this is a first large overview of phase 1. Really, this is intended something that you could refer to later if you were curious what's going on throughout the neighborhood. Next slide. This is the same idea, an overview map of all the phase 2 improvements. Next slide. And lastly, the phase 3 improvements, which are mainly the bulb outs. Next slide. So how much do these things cost? Phase 1, a conservative estimate is $930,000 to $980,000. Phase 2, around $600,000, and phase 3, upwards of $1.8 million. Next slide. And with that, we can end the presentation and open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tsai. We appreciate your presentation. Just one thing that comes to mind since you just ended on finances, and we just had our budget meeting coming up, or that just happened this past Wednesday. So I think what we approved is about, at least initially, a $500,000 placeholder for potentially phase one improvements on Line Ho. Do we have a sense of what the priorities would be within those, within that phase one approach, since we might not have $1 million to do phase one based on revised budget information?
Yes, and that's certainly something that we were afraid of, and we do have several ideas. One of them is to prioritize these improvements by locations based on speed. So that was the main concern, and while we did have some speeding throughout the neighborhood, it was concentrated in a few areas. We're proposing you can focus on those first. And also picking out more of the higher cost benefit projects that could really influence the driver's speed again.
So when we go back to the map, there's a whole bunch of options that maybe could get us. What would be some of those examples? What could the community expect if we approved going forward? Would be considered the high value speed or the higher cost benefit ones in phase one?
Right. So again, the main concern is speeding. And which one of these, when we look at this list, which one of these things can we say would give us the most benefit towards that speed? One of those things is the feeling that you get when you drive through this neighborhood, right? We're going back to the confusion of what intersections have stop signs, what intersections have crosswalks, what intersections can I go faster through? And that's really cleared up by all the striping changes. As proposed, a very conservative estimate is $320,000 for all of those changes. And then we've also been a little even more conservative by saying—
Michael, sorry, just to clarify, all of the striping you mean that you showed, that would be within the 320?
The striping at the intersections would be $320,000, and that would be before any construction management costs and contingency costs that we always include. So we've included a 20% contingency just for conservative purposes.
And when you say stripe, yeah, Director Matuza, could you clarify for us, does the striping mean the crosswalks, or maybe you can give us some big picture?
Right. Yeah, Michael, just what Mayor Beach was requesting was that based on the geographical area, where are those high priorities improvements lie within that map, if I understood that correctly, Madam Mayor. So, Madam Mayor, when you looked at the major streets that have the issues, they include Dwight Road, Bloomfield.
Could we go back to that slide while you're talking us through that, Madam City Clerk? The on the phase one high priority, the phase one slide has some markings on actual streets. I think that'd be helpful. There we go. Thank you.
Right. So as you see the map of the phase one, you're looking at essentially Dwight Road, Bloomfield, and you're also looking at Humboldt. And then on the east-west direction, you're looking at Howard and Bayswater. These are the major streets that would be prioritized for cut through and speeding issues. Again, the solutions will be low-cost solutions that also includes majority of that striping that would include lane line striping as well as the high visibility crosswalks, and that's what Michael was referring to, the estimates. These numbers that we have shown here are just the estimates. The real cost will be known when we go out to bid. So, and also we are optimistic because of the economic conditions. We may get lucky with bidding better bid prices.
Would the area around Victoria Park, it sounds like that was an area of high speeding in the presentation, be prioritized as well by Victoria Road?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. Let me see if I see Councilmember Brownrigg has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we could go back to that same slide. Thanks. So I have to tell you, it's a little hard to read on my laptop, but I think I'm following where we would be. Basically, it's all those crosshatches is where crosswalks would be put in. So if I'm understanding that right, I think that's terrific. And I'm wholly in support of those crosswalks. I think they'll do a great job in slowing people down. But I wanted to ask about two intersections that I heard a lot about walking the neighborhood that we didn't really touch on. And those are the two intersections with the weird geometry over on Rollins Road. And I'm sorry, I forget the, one is Bloomfield, I guess, and then the other one is the one that's just east of it. And I know neighbors in that area find people turning those corners extremely quickly. And so could you just explain what you have in mind for that?
Yeah, Councilmember Brownrigg, thank you for bringing that up, because we didn't want to have a long presentation, so we didn't have all the details here. But that is also included in the recommendations. There are bulb outs that are being considered to narrow down some of those intersections. And so they have iterative approach with painted bulb outs starting with, and then there will be, if that works out fine, then there will be permanent bulb outs, essentially to narrow down the roadway entry points where the traffic, incoming traffic, as well as the outgoing traffic from those neighborhoods will have to slow down before they ingress and egress at those points.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Brownrigg. Let me see if we have, Councilmember Colson has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, Director Matuza, the two most eastern, it looks like the one just east of Victoria Park on Humboldt, are those, I think that's Humboldt Road. I'm not sure what that is. The two right there by, even further along, the most eastern ones, closest to Rollins. Here, let me see. I don't, do I have my, usually have my screen, but I can't. The two up here. But anyway, they appear to be partially in, like half in San Mateo, half in Burlingame. And I'm just curious if, you know, we could approach San Mateo and get them to at least split the cost of any improvements on those intersections.
That is correct. Humboldt is shared by both Burlingame and San Mateo, and improvements along that roadway we'll have to work with San Mateo with their side of those improvements.
Okay, so in other words, can we only do our side, or do we have to get them to approve the concept as well, and then they would share the cost with us?
We have to get them to it's an intersection. You're talking about intersections. So those two intersections that you're referring to, they work well when they are totally done. You just can't do half side. So yes, we can do certain elements like high visibility crosswalks. You can do only in Burlingame portion, but Humboldt itself has, when you do crosswalks, you have to do it the entire street. So you do need San Mateo's concurrence on those.
Councilmember Colson, did you have any other questions?
No, that was really my only question. I suppose we'll open it to public comment. My only other thought on this is just that, you know, it seems like our staff has a really good grasp on it and a really good handle of where the priorities are and how we're going to do it. So my inclination would be to, you know, allow them some discretion to work all this out without us trying to micromanage it too much.
Thank you. I see Vice Mayor O'Brien has her hand up with question.
Yes, actually, Director Matuza, I had the same question as Councilmember Colson. So in regard to that intersection that incorporates both San Mateo and Burlingame, have we talked to them at all yet?
I know staff has been talking to them about Peninsula Avenue, some crosswalks there. Michael, do you have any update regarding any discussions with San Mateo on Humboldt?
Yeah, definitely have floated the idea. Since it's only been a draft at this point, we haven't had anything official.
And what was the reaction just with the draft? Do you think
It
they'd
would be
be
a good
open
idea.
to sharing costs or no?
Typically, we already have cost sharing arrangements for Humboldt, and it would just play along the same context.
Okay. All right, and then the next question, because I know your phase one is over the 500,000, which the mayor brought up. And I would feel relatively comfortable with Public Works kind of prioritizing which would be the most important, since you have communicated with the residents in the community on these issues. Because I don't think we'd be spending the whole cost at this point, you know, until we get to a point where we feel more comfortable with our budget and can afford to spend more money later on down the road.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate a point that me and Director Martuzzo were trying to make together. It's that, one, these are very conservative estimates, and two, we won't know the actual cost of these things until we get some bids on them. So there is room for optimism, but we will be able to prioritize.
And what do you think the timeline would be to get these estimates?
To get actual bids?
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, let me take that. Since the budget is approved for this project for phase one, effective July 1st, I would say within a very short time up to July 1st, the staff will get into the design of those. And I would say 6 months or so, we would be getting these improvements lined up for construction bids. You're looking at in the next fiscal year, essentially, the improvements being in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Other colleagues, questions before we open up to public comment? I see Councilmember Brownrigg, go ahead.
Thank you. Why does it take so long to design road striping? I mean, I can understand why if we're, you know, laying out roundabouts and stuff, that might be harder, but we're not. We're just talking about road striping. Does it really have to take 6 months?
Well, Councilmember Brownrigg, it's not just the striping. There are different standards. There's a different, it has to be, what you have here is that what we haven't done is the topography, the field measurements, those things haven't been done yet. So they have to be done. It will take some time to do the actual surveying and then placing all those details, design details, and then we have to go out to bid, and the procurement process, all of that would take that time.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Other colleagues with questions? If not, before I open to public comment, I have two quick questions. One that was brought to my attention, a member of the public had asked about this, and I figure I'll give staff the opportunity to answer it. So, you know, considering we have a lot of budget constraints right now with COVID-19 and the new world order, there was a suggestion by the public that we replace some of these traffic circles with stop signs instead because they're cheaper. Could you address that question, Director Martuzzo?
Madam Mayor, yeah, I know we frequently get requests about stop signs, and stop signs are very tricky. There are regulations about where to install stop signs, and there are warrant analysis. When we have conducted warrant analysis on many of these intersections, and majority of those intersections do not meet warrant, so we can't install stop signs. Stop signs are not meant to be used as a traffic control, speed control device. It's essentially for, if you install stop signs where they don't belong, there's a huge liability from people run the stop signs, and then there is a danger of collision. So that's the reason we do not recommend stop signs where they're not warranted.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my layperson's question, I really like the high visibility crosswalks that staff is recommending. I mean, I think you guys have put a lot of time into these recommendations. And I see in some intersections, you're separate from the high visibility crosswalk, you're, like at the Bancroft one, you have a small, not a roundabout, but a traffic circle that can do some traffic calming. Can those ever be combined? I'm thinking just around that Victoria Park. Would it ever be appropriate to do a high visibility crosswalk plus a small circle as well? Or is that just a bridge too far and that's too much activity going on in one given place? Just considering that's a highly trafficked area.
Michael, you want to take that? You looked into that.
So sure, would this suggestion be in lieu of the multi-way stop?
No, it's sort of a general question, but it occurred to me at the high visibility crosswalk, and there's a couple of them that you're recommending where, there's all that really zebra, the big zebra crossing. Is it ever considered where you put a small traffic circle in the middle of it as well to further reduce speeds, or do you just choose one or the other in traffic engineering?
I see. So we didn't include a closer view, but a lot of the enhanced crosswalks do have a adequate sized median in the middle. So while it's not a traffic circle in the middle of the intersection,
Okay, all right.
Median pedestrian refuge in the center.
Okay.
So that's what we do for the uncontrolled crossings.
Okay. It's just something that occurred to me through some of those that are particularly wide in that neighborhood. All right, thank you. Let's open it up to public comment at this point and see. We do have some members of the public who live in the neighborhood, and extra special thanks to the Citizens Advisory Committee, Ms. Pfaff and Ms. Feeney and Ms. Hesselgren, who really put a lot of time in with our traffic safety parking commissioners. I hope some of them are with us tonight, or any members of the public who would wish to speak. Everybody will have up to 3 minutes. So if you do want to speak, we just have to be fair to everybody. So I'll make sure to let you know when your time is up, but please join us. So Madam City Clerk, do we have anybody who's raised their hand or written in?
Some emails that have come in. The first one is from Manito. He states, I just wanted to thank the community members, the Citizen Advisory Panel, and the city for working towards crafting this plan. There's a lot to be proud of here. Would just like to urge the city to advance as much of the low-hanging fruit that's in the plan as quickly as possible, especially stop signs and any bicycle or specific walking improvements, and to continue to explore creative ways that the Lion Hogue plan can leverage other plans the city is developing, so that limited public funds are programmed to accomplish multiple objectives, helps all modes, and furthers overall safety. And then I received another one from Miss Adrienne Lee, and she states, 2 weeks ago, I spoke with Mayor Beach about the lack of continuity and communication of the various consultants Burlingame is using for the various traffic improvements, such as the El Camino project, Chapin Avenue, the new bicycle and pedestrian plan for 2020, and Lion Hogue study. Our bike and pedestrian committee has worked for 2 years to develop projects, often based on the statewide collision reports. We have developed design standards for high volume pedestrian zones, such as some of Lion Hogue. Some of our projects coincide with Lion Hogue proposals and some do not. My point is that I suggest you defer approving the Lion Hogue list of improvements until our committee, along with Alta consultants, have had a chance to look at them, see if we can incorporate them into the bike ped plan. Our BPAC has not been able to review the Lion Hogue suggestions and issues to even consider adding them into the bicycle and pedestrian plan. We want a consistent, inclusive plan that works for all of Burlingame and addresses the needs in a unified way. Please, your BPAC committee, let your BPAC committee have a chance to look at this before voting. If you can delay this decision for a few months, our committee would be able to look at the Lion Hogue and Alta and Chapin plans and have a unified overall winning and consistent concept for all of Burlingame. Please give us a chance to look at the plans. Help us to help you. And we also received a chat with questions. This individual states, my home is at Howard and Clarendon. Since we are not a four-way stop, what is the most effective way to decrease incidents on Howard at the cross streets that are not four-way stops? Additionally, she asked, for Public Works to comment on the first responder safety and efficacy in regard to the traffic solutions.
Okay. Do we have additional emails?
No additional emails, no additional chats, and I don't see anyone else's hand up to speak.
I don't either. Okay, so I want to thank members of the public for weighing in. I'd like to, before we have council comments, I'd like to give staff the opportunity to respond to two particular questions, and I can repeat them if there's too many, but they came in from the public. One was to address, you know, if you don't live at a four-way stop and there's not a treatment that's recommended, I think what I heard, and this one was Clarendon and Howard, I believe, what are ways that that this plan is addressing those concerns, and also first responders and their ability to navigate through this area in emergencies, I think I heard. And then I would also, I'll follow up with the other public comment question. So I don't know if Director Martuzzi, you want to take that one? Or...
Yeah, with regards to the improvements for uncontrolled intersections, the plan already includes several uncontrolled intersections. I believe Howard and Clarendon is also included, where there are striping proposed, and then there is also signage that is proposed to narrow down the driver's perspective of the roadway, so the traffic is slowed down in those intersections. And also there are bigger high visibility crosswalks also to help significantly in that regard.
And then as far as first responders, do you have any concerns about their emergency vehicles getting through? And
no, one area that we were concerned and we coordinated with our CCFD folks is that the installation of humps. Humps are not really one of the favorite choices of emergency response vehicles. So what we are looking at is designing the humps where there is a break for fire trucks and police fire trucks, particularly fire trucks, to go through, so they don't have to slow down significantly. So that's and we are going to try this as a pilot, and hopefully and get their feedback. And if it works, then we will implement them.
Okay.
Other than that, we have not heard any significant concerns.
Okay, thank you. And if you could address the other question, another question that came up in two public comments. I think it has to do with synergy with bicycle pedestrian plan that's happening sort of simultaneously. This Lion Hogue has been 2 years in the work. The bike ped master plan has been 1 year in the work. Lots of open public meetings where everybody is invited to participate. But could you speak to the staging of approving this or not approving this? And then also how the bike ped master plan will have the opportunity to look at pedestrian and improvements, traffic calming moving forward, including in the Lion Hogue neighborhood, and how they kind of, how that committee can help and support. And
so happy to do that. So the bike ped master plan obviously is a separate effort, and it's been progressing and it has not been completed. So the Lion Hogue project was conceived primarily due to the complaints of the neighborhood due to traffic, speeding and cut through traffic and parking issues. So much of this effort was based on the public input received through that process. Adrienne Lee has been participating in those meetings as well, and she has provided some suggestions. As part of the implementation, what staff is looking forward to is that any recommendations that may come out of the bike ped plan that is primarily looking at the bike ped facilities would be layered on top of these improvements that are recommended here for the Lion Hogue, and they will be implemented as one project. And that's what staff is looking at that. And then many of these improvements are iterative and they can be changed. So if we were to wait for the bike ped plan, this will delay the entire process. So Lion Hogue folks have been waiting for this for a long time. And staff believes that many of the improvements that are recommended here in the Lion Hogue will significantly improve pedestrian safety, especially due to high visibility crosswalk, as well as they will provide opportunity safer facilities for bikers, bicyclists, and because of reduced speed on these roadways.
I appreciate that, and yet, particularly, and well, always we want to be fiscally responsible, but if there's ways we can address both needs, which it certainly seems like these pedestrian improvements are going to, traffic calming are going to help all modes of transportation as well. Colleagues, do we have any final comments or questions as we wrap this up here? Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just applaud the effort by everybody. This is a great result, and hopefully we got much more work to do. It's unfortunate that our budget constraints are going to slow down what I think we should get done soon. And I mean, I feel terrible for the neighbors at Lion Ho who've been so patient with this. And I'm listening to the concerns about working with all the other initiatives that we have in town and weighing that against this delay that, that you know, the time that these neighbors have spent waiting for these measures to be taken. And I am in favor of moving forward. And I do believe what the Mr. Martuza said, that some of these are well thought out, and I think will end up matching what the BPED plan comes up with. So I'm in favor of moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. Councilmember Brownrigg, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think we'd all find it helpful to know what roughly we're talking about for 500,000, but it sounds to me like we're talking about all of the striping that is shown. And I think that is a terrific place to start. And I say, let's get on with it. I mean, you know, let's get that done ASAP because I think that will have a tremendous benefit. I take the point of staff that, you know, there might be ways to coordinate with the bike plan in the future. But since we're not doing anything structurally, we're not actually doing bulb outs, we're not doing roundabouts in this first phase, it's just paint. And so paint can get changed. And I really do think it will make a big difference for the community. For the record, I also love the way you guys are proposing to close off that funky intersection by the train station and the tennis courts. I think that's really a brilliant solution to that weird intersection. So I'm a big advocate for moving quickly to get these long thought through designs in place, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Councilmember Coulson, go ahead.
So I agree. I think we should move forward with this as quickly as possible. And I believe if we do get to the point where we run through our 500,000 at mid-year when we do our budgeting, we can always bring it back as a part of the mid-year budget revision for the CIP. And I just don't want to have spent several $100,000s on a report and then not be able to implement everything that'll make a difference. I think this is something we need to invest capital in, and it serves a huge part of our community and one that's going to be very impacted when that Peninsula interchange comes. So I fully support this, and then I hope Public Works will come back to us when we get that cup fills up and ask for round 2.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Seeing no other comments from colleagues, just to make sure. I concur. I mean, I think this is really, there's been a lot of community outreach, a lot of effort from staff, consultants. Thank you again to Mr. Martos, Mr. Launder, Mr. Bush, who are on that steering committee with Ms. Pfaff, Ms. Feeney, and Ms. Hesselgren. We really appreciate the extra time. I would concur that the striping can do a lot for traffic calming. And I would just, my one other add to the conversation is I hope staff will be really, really creative with value engineering that can be done. There can be so much with paint and with plastic. It may not look great, but those temporary solutions, whether it's a temporary roundabout or the temporary bulb outs, there can be really effective to traffic calm, and they're temporary. If the community doesn't like them, we can change them. So let's be as aggressive as we can with the budget that we have to get as much of this implemented quickly. scrappy and get some real improvements for the community there. So thank you so much for the proposal and all the hard work, and Mr. Sy for the presentation. With that, do we have to approve this? I'm looking right here.
Resolution.
Resolution. It's an official resolution. So colleagues, would somebody like to propose approving the resolution tonight? Who would like the honor? Maybe Councilmember Brownrigg, who when he was mayor 2 years ago, started this whole shebang.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am very happy to make a resolution to proceed along the lines of the staff report as amended by the conversation this evening by council.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Second, I think Councilmember Ortiz has seconded. Let's take our roll call.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Aye.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes, thank you. The motion passes unanimously, and this will be, I think, a good thing for the community. So thanks to everybody for their hard work. With that, we are on item number 11, Council Committee and Activities Reports and Announcements. There's one written. Anybody else would like to add additional information or comments? I have one other, but myself, but if anybody else would like to go first. No, okay. The one I would like to just convey is a concept and idea that I had that I'm going to appoint a bit of a, I don't know if it's a convening or an ad hoc, a concept to address COVID-19 response in sort of a multidisciplinary way, engaging different community leaders to sort of put our heads together and see how we can support one another. Ran the idea by the city manager and also the vice mayor. If this proves to be effective, I'm hoping that the mayor and vice mayor can participate in this community convening, and if it proves useful, perhaps it can continue throughout next year. And it just seems that mayor and vice mayor is a good combination to have for continuity moving forward. But I'll keep you posted, have a little bit more of a write-up and of how we can just continue to find creative ways to find community leaders that can help one another through all the different challenges we're facing here in Burlingame. So the model is called a collaborative, and it's been successful in a lot of other communities throughout the country. So we'll call it the Burlingame Collaborative, and we'll keep you posted on that. More to follow. All right, any other final comments, or if not, future agenda items? Seeing none. Any acknowledgements? Does anybody have somebody we wish to adjourn in honor of that we may have lost recently? Seeing none. All right, well, again, thank you everybody for a very productive and relatively efficient meeting as well. It's always a little bit clunky on Zoom, but we're getting the hang of it, and we appreciate members of the community participating tonight. We wish everybody good health and safety. Follow those shelter-in-place orders. They've changed slightly, but we are certainly not out of the woods. So thank you all for being safe and healthy and taking care of one another. At this point, we'll adjourn the meeting at 9:09 p.m. Have a good evening and a great week, everybody. Good night.
All right. Night.
Night.